This is macOS Ken.
A big look at Apple and user privacy, a couple of Big Sur stories, and new stuff and returning stuff for Apple TV+. It is Friday, the 20th of November, 2020. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Right Side Up. Ready with the growth marketing help you need. Learn more at rightsideup.com/macOSCan. This show is also sponsored by BetterHelp, online counseling that's there for you. You've heard me talk about BetterHelp for a while now, how you answer a few questions, they match you with a licensed professional therapist with whom you can work, how you can do traditional sessions over the phone or on video, or kind of keep a running conversation going over text. That's the way I like. First of all, because it's not so fraught. And second, well, it's like always working on your issue without feeling like work. Now, maybe you want something more structured, more traditional. That's great. Phone, video, on your computer or your iPad. BetterHelp works for whichever way you want. Want to try it out? As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/macOSCan. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that is BetterHelp, HELP, betterhelp.com/macOSCan. One more time, it's betterhelp.com/macOSCan. And a big thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's show. With so much this week about new Macs and App Store commissions, there's been a story brewing that I've been kicking down the road all week long. It's kind of boiled over on Thursday, though. It ends, for now, with Apple reaffirming its commitment to user privacy. To get there, though, we start a few months back. At WWDC, Apple announced something called App Tracking Transparency Permissions. According to Apple's developer site, developers should use the App Tracking Transparency Framework if their app collects data about end users and shares it with other companies for purposes of tracking across apps and websites. The App Tracking Transparency Framework presents an app tracking authorization request to the user and provides the tracking authorization status. Now, that announcement knocked a number of online groups tied to advertising on their backside. Originally meant to launch with iOS 14, a number of advertising players, including Facebook, petitioned Apple to delay ATT's implementation. And Apple agreed. As Apple put it in a letter this week, the company delayed the release of ATT to early next year to give developers the time they indicated they needed to properly update their systems and data practices. I'm not saying they regret that decision, but they may come to do so. First, rather than properly updating their systems and data practices, a group of advertisers in France argued that what Apple wants to do is overkill and might just kill their business. An Apple Insider story I brought you a few weeks ago said a collection of advertisers and publishers in France have filed a complaint with the country's competition authority, claiming that iOS 14's blocking of automatic ad tracking will severely affect revenues. The group argues that iOS users in France have already been asked whether they're cool being tracked. Apple Insider says the companies in the French consortium have previously pointed out that because of European regulations over GDPR data protections, iOS 14 users are effectively going to be asked twice every time. All hail the App Tracking Transparency Framework. The advertisers are also said to be upset that Apple has and will continue to have the info over which users might opt out, though Apple says it doesn't use or even track that info, which we'll get to. Also upset that Apple has that information is Max Schrems, a privacy advocate, activist, and founder of the organization NOIB, an acronym for None of Your Business. Far from upset about ATT, Noib is bothered that Apple has IDFAs in iPhones. IDFA stands for Identifier for Advertisers. The site AdJust explains those pretty succinctly, saying the identifier for advertisers is a random device identifier assigned by Apple to a user's device. Advertisers use this to track data so they can deliver customized advertising. The IDFA is used for tracking and identifying a user without revealing personal information. Not good enough for Noib. Bloomberg ran a piece earlier this week saying that group had lodged complaints against Apple in Spain and Germany for putting IDFAs in iPhones in the first place. The piece quotes Noib's lawyer, Stefano Rossetti, as saying, "With our complaints, we want to enforce a simple principle. Trackers are illegal unless a user freely consents. Smartphones are the most intimate device for most people, and they must be tracker-free by default." For its part, the Cupertino company says Apple does not access or use the IDFA on a user's device for any purpose. Our aim is always to protect the privacy of our users, and our latest software release, iOS 14, is giving users even greater control over whether or not they want to allow apps to track them by linking their information with data from third parties for the purpose of advertising or sharing their information with data brokers. Is giving users even greater control eventually? Apple calls Noib's assertion factually inaccurate and says that it looks forward to making that clear to privacy regulators should they examine the complaint. Now, it's funny, not funny, Apple talking about the tracking controls in iOS 14 that it hasn't turned on yet. Seeing it as not funny is the group Ranking Digital Rights. That group, members of which include Amnesty International, Electronic Frontier Foundation, and Human Rights Watch, among others, that group wrote an open letter to Apple CEO Tim Cook in early October, calling on Apple to dispense with the delay and implement the app tracking transparency plan for iOS 14 immediately. Kicking off that letter, the group said, "We, the undersigned civil and human rights organizations, are writing to express our disappointment that Apple is delaying the full implementation of iOS 14's anti-tracking features until early 2021. These features will constitute a vital policy improvement with the potential to strengthen respect for privacy across the industry. Apple should implement these features as expeditiously as possible." The group praised Apple early on in the letter for its ATT plans, then shifted again to disappointment over their delay until early next year. Quoting the letter again, "This means that these privacy protections will not be available during the critical weeks leading up to and following the 2020 U.S. elections, when people's data can be used to target them with personalized political ads. It will also leave iOS users vulnerable to rising levels of government surveillance triggered by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, we are particularly concerned by reports that the delay, which Apple says will give developers time to make the necessary changes, was due to pressure from Facebook and other companies whose business models are rooted in non-consensual data collection at a global scale and the discriminatory practices that this data enables." Not only did Apple not follow the organization's wishes, didn't even get back to them, at least not publicly, for a month and a half. And to be fair, though, there was the iPhone event and the Mac event, plus there was the election, and we're still dealing with the pandemic. Receiving the letter on the 6th of October, Apple responded yesterday, the 19th of November. Mac Rumors highlights that response, which basically says, yeah, we hear ya, with many, many more words. Signed by Apple's Global Privacy Senior Director, Jane Horvath, the letter says that Apple believes that privacy is a fundamental human right and that the company designs its products to protect user privacy and security as a first principle. They're excited about ATT, and they're excited about the new App Privacy Information section on the App Store launching in December. Having had Facebook thrown in its face, Apple threw it right back. After talking about Apple's ability to target ads without tracking people, Horvath wrote, "By contrast, Facebook and others have a very different approach to targeting. Not only do they allow the grouping of users into smaller segments, they use detailed data about online browsing activity to target ads. Facebook executives have made clear their intent is to collect as much data as possible across both first and third-party products to develop and monetize detailed profiles of their users, and this disregard for user privacy continues to expand to include more of their products." Basically, Apple responded with what ranking digital rights already knew: that tracking can be invasive and even creepy, that Facebook is just the worst, and that Apple has a stated commitment to user privacy. What Apple did not do was what the organization requested: make app tracking transparency permissions available immediately. It did not address the question of whether it was pressured to delay the permissions. It also did not say exactly when they would be made available, just early next year. More news in a moment, but first a word from Right Side Up, ready with the growth marketing help you need. When I say help, help is what I mean. You've worked hard to grow your business. It's yours. You've been there every step of the way. Right Side Up doesn't take anything away from what you've done. Rather, their premium, fully vetted growth marketing teams look at what you've got, what you have done, and what might work better to market your business and attract more customers. From folks who can sit in on the occasional meeting to people who are practically part of your company, Right Side Up knows that businesses are different, but the skills they bring can work for organizations of all sizes. Whether you want one person or 5 hours a week or 50, their custom teams are designed for exactly what your team needs. From early-stage ventures to fast-growing tech companies to Fortune 500 brands, they are ready with the growth marketing help you need. And right now, Right Side Up is offering macOS Ken listeners a free week of service after your first quarter of engagement when you go to rightsideUp.com/macOSKen. That's rightsideUp.com/macOSKen to speak with one of their marketing strategists and finally get the customer acquisition and marketing help you need. Go to rightsideUp.com/macOSKen. And a big thanks to Right Side Up for sponsoring today's show. News of a Big Sur update. Mac Rumor says Apple is out with another one of those weird ones. On Thursday, the piece says the company released a revised version of macOS 11.0.1 Big Sur, which appears to be available for some Mac users who had not previously installed the macOS 11.0.1 update. Why the weird newness? Only Apple knows, and it's not saying. For older Macs bricked by Big Sur, Apple has a few suggestions. Apple Insider says the company has addressed issues with 2013 and 2014 MacBook Pros rendered useless by macOS 11. Specifically, the piece reminds readers, updates in some cases result in a permanent black screen or a screen bearing a circle with a line through it, a problem that does not resolve itself when restarting the machine in safe mode. Attempts to use Apple's Internet Recovery tool have also been unsuccessful. Now Apple's got some other ideas, presented in a support doc. If an impacted Mac does not start properly, the piece says, Apple says to press and hold the power button on your Mac for at least 10 seconds, then release. If your Mac is on, it turns off. Unplug all external devices from your Mac, including any display and USB accessories, and remove any card inserted in the SDXC card slot. Then turn your Mac on. If the issue persists, reset the SMC as described for notebook computers with a non-removable battery. If the issue persists, reset NVRAM or PRAM. And if none of that works, contact Apple support. Let's end the day with Apple TV Plus news, starting with a new series coming soon. Apple Insider says the Cupertino streamer has set a premiere date for the Israeli thriller Losing Alice. If you don't remember which one that is, the piece says the show follows Alice, a 48-year-old film director who struggles with finding relevance after raising a family. When Alice encounters 24-year-old screenwriter Sophie, she becomes obsessed with Sophie and eventually sacrifices her morals to achieve relevance, power, and success. Apple bought the show last June. It's set to premiere on Friday, the 22nd of January. Just under 1 month later, one of Apple's flagship premiere shows will touch down for its second season. The Mac Observer says Ronald D. Moore's alt history series For All Mankind is set to land on the 19th of February. The piece says Season 2 will pick up in 1983. The space battle between the U.S. and Soviet Union is going to even new levels, with the militarization of NASA and threat of nuclear war taking its toll on the characters. Uplifting as ever is our Mr. Moore. Not unlike the Mariah Carey Christmas special, when I first heard about this next Apple TV Plus plan, got a little queasy. Deadline says Apple is in on Tetris, the movie. I had a moment, worrying about a Super Mario Bros. Sized fiasco. Turns out, though, Tetris, the movie, is a movie about making the game Tetris. Taron Egerton of Rocketman and the Kingsman movies is set to star. According to Deadline, Egerton is playing Henk Rogers, a Dutch video game designer who first secured the rights to distribute Tetris on consoles where it found popularity. He was heavily involved in a dispute that arose over the franchise's copyright in the 1980s. No word on when the film might hit. Personally, though, I like to think that they'll spend some time between now and its premiere moving it around in the schedule, then moving it again, then turning it a bit and moving it again, then shifting it a bit and moving it again until it finally drops. And finally today, for me, there was a Ted Lasso before Ted Lasso. It was Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet. And it, or something like it, is on its way back. iDownload blog cites a mention in Production Weekly of a production called Mythic Quest Titan's Rift. iDownload blog tries to surmise what the title might mean. Personally, I do not care. I'm just excited to hear there's movement on the MQ front. Coming up in a few minutes, the after show's Mike Rose wraps the week spinning the wheel of stuff. Hear what chance brings us in a few minutes. Look for that show and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Also wrapping a week of macOS Ken Live this afternoon, 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. I know we are talking about HomePod Mini today. That's by request. Not sure yet what else is in store, which is kind of how that show goes. Find out for yourself live at youtube.com/KenRay at 3:30 Pacific, 6:30 Eastern. You can catch replays there as well. And of course, you can subscribe to the audio podcast, macOS Ken Live, wherever you find such shows. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/macOSKen. This show is also sponsored by Right Side Up, ready with the growth marketing help you need. Learn more at rightsideup.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, That is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.